People say, oh, the miracle child. She's not the miracle child. It's not her. It's just, she's God's vessel. Miracle for a little girl. I love you.
Olivia Duron has been coming to see Paige since being diagnosed with uterine cancer. She says Paige's prayers give her hope.
I'm scared, but well, what can I do? I'm just scared. I don't want to leave my family. I still haven't finished my mission.
They say the world is wicked, but even the world would shudder at the name Eusebio. A father, a protector, a provider, at least that's what they called him. But if the world knew the truth, they would know he was none of those things. What kind of man torments his own daughter so much that running away feels like the only way to survive? What kind of monster rehearses his cruelty until it becomes second nature, until his victim no longer flinches, no longer fights, until suffering becomes as routine as breathing? And what kind of mother, a woman who should have known better, watches in silence, refusing to acknowledge the agony written in her daughter's eyes? For 15 years, Abby lived in a house built on deception. To the world, they were a normal family, smiling at church, exchanging pleasantries with neighbors, posing for photos that told a lie. But behind closed doors, normalcy was a performance, and pain was the script. Every day she played her role. Every night she lived through a horror only the walls bore witness to. 3 children. 3 innocent lives born out of a nightmare. But even as her body carried the evidence of her suffering, the world around her remained blind. The whispers in her head tried to convince her this was her fate, that no one would save her, that her cries would dissolve into nothingness. And for years she believed it. But the thing about silence, it can only last for so long. The day Abby broke free was the day she shattered the illusion. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a reckoning, a force of truth that refused to be buried beneath shame and fear. Eusebio had spent years ensuring her pain stayed hidden, silencing her with threats, manipulation, and the weight of an unspeakable reality. But Abby would no longer be a prisoner of his wickedness. And now the world will hear her, but are you ready for the truth? Because this isn't just a story, it's an unveiling, a testament to the depths of human cruelty and the resilience of the human spirit. A glimpse into the evil that festers behind closed doors and the courage it takes to break free. It will shake you, it will anger you, and it will leave you asking the same question Abby did for years. How could this happen? The answer is chilling. This is Abby's story, and once you hear it, you won't forget it. Welcome to Detective Jeffrey Crime Station. A huge thank you to our amazing subscribers and viewers for joining us on this journey into the world of true crime. We're honored that you've chosen to spend your time with us, and we're grateful for your trust and support. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to stay up to date on our latest captivating stories. Your engagement means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more thrilling and thought-provoking content with you. Abigail Alvarado's story is one of unimaginable suffering, resilience, and eventual escape from a life of prolonged abuse. Her background reveals a harrowing tale of exploitation and survival that shocked the world when it came to light. Abigail, known as Abby, was just a scared 8-year-old in 1996 when she, along with her brother and sister, were taken from their mother's home by Child Protective Services in San Antonio, Texas. The 3 siblings were sent to live in Hawaii with their uncle, Eusebio Castillo, a sergeant in the U.S. Army, and his wife, Laura, a child care worker. Although she was sad to leave her mom, she thought living in Hawaii would be an adventure. Instead, it turned out to be her worst nightmare. Over a 17-year period, until she turned 25, Abby endured physical and sexual abuse at the hands of both her uncle and aunt. The abuse began shortly after she moved in with the Castillos, who later adopted her and her siblings. What started as a seemingly normal family dynamic quickly devolved into a life of terror and manipulation. The Castillos kept Abby isolated, cutting her off from the outside world and ensuring she had no contact with anyone who might help her escape. The abuse escalated when Abby turned 15, and the Castillos forced her to bear 3 children with Eusebio, whom they claimed as their own. They were in bed, and they told me to sit down on the bed with them. Abby, now 30, recalls, "We're going to have a talk. This is what you're going to do. And that's it. End of story." In 2005, as a 17-year-old high school student, Abby gave birth to her first daughter. 3 years later, she gave birth to her second daughter, followed by a son in 2011. Throughout these years, Abby lived in constant fear, subjected to relentless control and manipulation. Despite the unimaginable circumstances, her will to survive never wavered. She dreamed of a day when she could break free from the nightmare that had become her life. That day finally came around 2013, when Abby met her future husband, Rudy, at the Castillos' San Antonio home. The Castillos were making claims that Abby's oldest daughter had the power to heal diseases, and Rudy had come to the church one day. "He came to the church one day and something told me that he's going to be the one helping me," she says. With Rudy's support, Abby found the courage to escape. She fled with her children, seeking refuge and finally exposing the horrors she had endured. Her bravery in coming forward led to the arrest and subsequent prosecution of Eusebio and Laura Castillo. The San Antonio courtroom fell into a heavy silence on that Tuesday afternoon. The air felt thick with tension, almost suffocating, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Outside, the Texas sun blazed mercilessly, but inside, a different kind of heat permeated the room. The burning anger of justice, long overdue. Eusebio Castillo, 48, sat motionless at the defendant's table. His weathered face, once commanding respect as an army sergeant, now appeared hollow, devoid of emotion. How had it come to this? What darkness had festered in his soul to bring him to this moment of reckoning? The questions hung in the air like specters, demanding answers that perhaps no human mind could truly comprehend. Across the room, Abigail Alvarado clutched her husband Rudy's hand so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Years of pain, of secrets, of unspeakable horrors were about to culminate in this moment. Would justice finally acknowledge the nightmare she had lived? Could any sentence truly reflect the childhood, the innocence, the very life that had been stolen from her? The case had shocked the community to its core. Eusebio and his wife, Laura Castillo, 47, had perpetrated one of the most disturbing cases of prolonged abuse the Texas justice system had ever encountered. For more than 15 years of birthdays, holidays, ordinary Tuesdays and Sundays, they had sexually assaulted their niece and adopted daughter Abigail. The abuse had begun when she was just 9 years old, a child who had been promised safety and family, only to be betrayed in the most fundamental way imaginable. The horror of the case deepened with each revealed detail. The abuse had led to the birth of 3 children, innocent souls brought into the world through violence and manipulation. These children had been raised to believe that their mother was their sister, a twisted fabrication designed to maintain the Castillos' facade of normalcy to the outside world. How many morning breakfasts had been served at that table, with lies as palpable as the food they consumed? How many neighbors had waved hello, never suspecting the darkness that dwelled within those walls? State District Judge Joey Contreras shifted in his seat, the weight of the moment evident in the deep furrows of his brow. The court had seen many criminals, had heard countless testimonies of human cruelty, but some cases pierced through the professional armor of even the most seasoned judicial veterans. This was one such case. "You took a little girl and pretended to offer her a loving home," Judge Contreras began, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Each word seemed to drop into the courtroom like a stone into still water, creating ripples of emotion that touched everyone present. "You had her call you Dad and Mom. Then you began doing unspeakable damage and harm to her at the age of 9. The judge paused, perhaps searching for words adequate to address such depravity. What language could possibly capture the magnitude of such betrayal? What sentence could balance the scales for a childhood shattered beyond recognition? "It is not forgivable," he continued, his voice growing harder, reflecting the collective outrage of a community confronted with the darkest aspects of human behavior. "It boggles my mind how someone can do that to their own baby." Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel as a means of encouraging us. Thank you as you do so. The irony of those words, "their own baby," hung in the air. Abigail had been their niece, then their adopted daughter, then the mother of children they claimed as siblings to her. The perversion of the most sacred family relationships had been total and complete. What does it do to a child's sense of self, of reality, when the very foundations of trust and identity are so thoroughly corrupted? Eusebio Castillo had pleaded guilty to the sexual assault charges on October 1st. Had it been a moment of remorse, a final acknowledgement of his crimes, or merely a calculated attempt to avoid the life sentences that now loomed before him? He had elected to let Judge Contreras decide his fate, perhaps hoping that this apparent submission to the court's wisdom might soften his punishment. If so, he had gravely miscalculated the depth of revulsion his actions had inspired. His wife, Laura Castillo, had already faced her judgment day. Months earlier, she had pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated sexual assault and received a 33-year prison sentence. She remained in a state prison, separated from the husband with whom she had shared not just a home, but a conspiracy of abuse that had spanned more than a decade and a half. Prosecutor Stephen Spear rose to address the court, his normally composed demeanor visibly strained by the case that had consumed so many hours of investigation, of careful documentation, of listening to accounts that would haunt many of the legal professionals involved for years to come. "I have never encountered a situation where someone has been sexually assaulted more than 1,000 times, he told the judge, his voice carrying both professional assessment and unmistakable personal outrage. "The level of perversion is unreal. 1,000 times. The number hung in the air, a terrible quantification of suffering, but even that staggering figure failed to capture the totality of Abigail's experience. The fear that preceded each assault, the shame that followed, the psychological walls she must have built to survive, brick by brick, year after year. How does a young girl process such systematic violation? How does she make sense of a world where those meant to protect her were the very source of her deepest wounds? Anthony Cantrell, the defense attorney tasked with the unenviable job of representing Eusebio Castillo, approached his duty with the solemn recognition of the facts. There was no denying the crimes. They were documented, confessed, irrefutable. Instead, he acknowledged his client's actions and offered an apology to Alvarado that, while professionally necessary, seemed pitifully inadequate against the backdrop of such profound harm. In a move that struck many in the courtroom as almost surreal in its audacity, Cantrell pointed to Eusebio Castillo's cancer diagnosis. Doctors had given the man a 60% chance of dying within 5 years. Was this meant to evoke sympathy? To suggest that natural justice might render the court's decision moot? The implicit suggestion that Castillo's potential suffering might somehow balance the scales against Abigail's decade and a half of torment felt obscene to many observers. Cantrell ventured further, expressing concern about the justice system handing down ridiculous sentences for publicity. The comment seemed to hang in the air, disconnected from the gravity of the proceedings, from the lived reality of the victim who sat just feet away, from the 3 children born of abuse who would forever carry the complications of their origins. Judge Contreras' response cut to the heart of the matter, addressing not just the legal considerations but the moral weight of the case before him. "As a judge, I represent my community and speak for them," he stated, his words deliberate and measured. And sometimes, certain crimes evoke such outrage that a powerful component of symbolism is required. With that, he began reading out the sentences for each of the 10 counts of aggravated sexual assault against Castillo. The courtroom held its collective breath. For the first 2 counts, Castillo received consecutive life sentences, back-to-back eternities of confinement. 3 more concurrent life sentences followed. For the remaining counts, 20 years each were added to the already insurmountable total. As the judge spoke the sentences into existence, into legal reality, Abigail and her husband Rudy broke down in tears. Were they tears of relief, of vindication, of a burden finally shared with a system that had at last acknowledged the depth of the wrong done to her? Or were they tears of grief for all that could never be returned? The childhood irrevocably lost, the innocence that could never be restored, the normal life that had been denied her from such a tender age. Perhaps they were all of these things, and more besides, the complex, contradictory emotions of a moment that had been both dreaded and desperately awaited for so long. After the sentencing, Abigail, Rudy, and their prosecution team stood side by side, a united front facing the man who had cast such a long shadow over Abigail's life. The moment had come for her to speak directly to her abuser, to look into the eyes that had watched her grow up in captivity, to address the man who had twisted the sacred title of father into something monstrous. Abigail read aloud from a written statement, her voice sometimes faltering but never breaking completely. This, too, was an act of reclamation. The voice that had been silenced by threats for so long now rang out in a court of law, bearing witness to her own truth. "You were a monster," she said, her eyes fixed on Castillo's impassive face. Did he feel anything at all as he listened? Was there any remnant of humanity left within him that could comprehend the magnitude of his crimes? Or had he traveled so far into darkness that even now, faced with his victim's testimony and the full weight of judicial condemnation, he remained unreachable? "The punishment you receive today is the punishment you deserve for being so evil," Abigail continued, each word a brick in the wall she was building between her past and her future. Throughout the proceedings, the press had maintained the usual protocol of not identifying victims of sexual abuse. But Abigail had previously shared her story with a reporter and allowed her name to be used. This, too, was an act of reclamation, taking ownership of her narrative, refusing to be defined solely as an anonymous victim of someone else's crimes. Outside the courtroom, away from the formal procedures and legal language, Abigail and Rudy embraced. The simple human gesture, arms wrapped around each other, the sharing of breath and heartbeat, stood in stark contrast to the clinical descriptions of abuse that had filled the courtroom minutes before. In that embrace was the possibility of healing, of a life reclaimed. "That's what I was asking for," she said of Castillo's sentence, her voice steadier now, looking toward a future where this day would be a memory rather than an anticipated reckoning. "I'm just glad it's over." In a case that left even seasoned legal professionals shaken, Bexar County Criminal District Attorney Nicholas LaHood did not mince words. "These people are just evil, period, end of story," he stated. "There's not a lot that shocks us, unfortunately, but this is definitely up there in terms of the level of depravity. It's the kind of thing you hope no one else ever has to experience." Presently, she is slowly but surely rebuilding her life. "I'm finally able to sleep without waking up in fear, without the haunting feeling of Rudy trying to hold me," she shares. "That doesn't happen anymore, and it feels incredible to know I don't have to live in fear. He's never going to get out, and that gives me peace." Abby's journey is one of resilience and hope. By sharing her story, she aims to inspire and empower others who may have faced similar struggles. "I don't want people to feel sorry for me," she explains. "I'm opening up so that others, women, men, anyone, can hear my story and learn from it. If my experience can help even one person feel less alone or find the strength to speak out, then it's worth it." Her courage in the face of adversity serves as a powerful reminder of the human spirit's ability to heal and rise above even the darkest circumstances. But was it truly over? The legal proceedings had concluded, certainly. Justice, as defined by the courts, had been served with a sentence that ensured Eusebio Castillo would never again walk free. Yet for Abigail, for Rudy, for the 3 children born of abuse, the journey was ongoing. What conversations lay ahead for that family? What explanations would need to be given, revised, given again, as young minds matured and could grasp more of their complicated origins? And what of the community that had been blind to the suffering in their midst for so long? What soul-searching might occur in neighborhoods where a child had been enslaved in plain sight? How many had seen the Castillo family at grocery stores, at school events, at community gatherings, never suspecting the horrors that transpired behind closed doors? These questions would linger long after the courtroom had emptied, after the news cycle had moved on to other stories, after the legal files had been archived. They would be addressed not in the formal language of the courts, but in the messy, complicated business of living. In therapy sessions, in late-night conversations, in moments of unexpected grief or surprising joy. For now, though, there was this. A sentence that acknowledged the gravity of the crimes, a victim who had survived to see justice done, and the first tentative steps toward a future no longer defined by the shadow of Eusebio Castillo. It wasn't everything. It couldn't erase the past. But it was something, a foundation upon which Abigail Alvarado could continue building the life that had been denied her for so long. And perhaps that was as much as any court could offer, not healing itself, but the conditions under which healing might eventually become possible. Abby's story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of unspeakable evil. Her courage in speaking out not only brought her abusers to justice, but also shed light on the dark realities of abuse that can occur behind closed doors. Her journey from victim to survivor has inspired many, and her fight for justice continues to serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of supporting survivors and holding perpetrators accountable. We hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. Because you did, subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to show your appreciation. Additionally, tap the notification bell to be kept abreast with our latest videos and ensure you don't miss out on any new content. This will keep you informed about our upcoming true crime stories and allow you to stay engaged with our community. Thank you once again. Your support means a lot to us.